In this 2-minute tip, I want to talk just a moment about preserving your hearing. And that's something that's usually not necessarily addressed by a lot of musicians, but it is important because we have a lot of older musicians today that have tinnitus, which is the ringing in the ears, or they may have hearing deficits where they can't hear that well. Most notably, you have people like Pete Townsend, who has severe hearing issues, Eric Clapton, some of the other ones. And why does this happen? Well, historically, PA systems for bands were not that great. One of the reasons that the Beatles stopped touring early on was because they really couldn't hear themselves that well because the equipment just wasn't that great. And so we got bigger amplifiers. Some of you may be familiar with the Marshall amps that have the stacks. That was Pete Townsend who said, hey, I want a speaker cabinet with 8 12-inch speakers in it. And that's where the whole half stack and full stacks come from. The thing is, with today's technology, you don't necessarily need as loud of an amplifier because we have good monitor systems. You can get in-ear monitors. You can use modelers so that you're don't even have an amp on stage. So as a musician, it's really important to protect your hearing because that's how you're able to play with other musicians and play with bands, to be able to listen to mixes when you're recording. If you start losing hearing, sometimes it can be high-end roll-off where you don't hear highs quite as well, or it could be low frequency response. All of these things can affect how well you perform and how you mix your sound. So it's important to protect your hearing using some type of device or going to smaller amplifiers. You don't necessarily need as big of an amplifier nowadays because we have good monitor systems, whether it's in-ear monitors or floor monitors that are in front of you. Your amp does not have to be super big because you can mic it up. Things that you can do to protect your hearing. The biggest thing is using earplugs, and there's a lot of different types out there. These aren't like the standard ones that you would find, in a home improvement store. These will reduce the sound level without necessarily compromising the spectrum of audio that you hear. So you still hear all the highs and you still hear the lows, and it's not as muffled. Even in your day-to-day routines, when I cut grass, I usually wear a pair of headphones that filter out a lot of the extra noise. Now, with hearing damage, it's kind of a volume and duration thing. So the louder the sound is, the less exposure you need to damage your hearing. But that doesn't mean that being exposed to loud sounds for long periods of time can't still damage your hearing. So that's why it's important to protect your hearing as much as you can. If you're playing in smaller clubs where you don't really have a good PA system and you're forced to kind of use a louder amplifier to be heard, there's things you can do like tilting the amplifier back some so it's pointed more at your ears, to help you hear it better at lower volumes, and things like drum shields, being able to have some type of plexiglass around the drums to help cut the volume down a little bit. So if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Also, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so be notified when I post new content. That's it for today's 2-minute tip. If you have suggestions about protecting your hearing, or if you have a story about when you've played and ended up with some kind of ringing in your ears, leave a comment below.